it kind of feels like with me being made redundant is kind of my own fault. I know with the way tech is at the moment, it's, you know, I can't help but kick myself every now and again and just think, why didn't you start earlier? Why didn't you learn this sort of thing when you had a passion for it when you were younger? Why have you left it too late?
I want to show you guys something. When I finished recording the video last week, I found this thing on my tripod, and all it had, as you can see in the light, a picture of a camera. And I had no idea what it was. I should have done, really. But inside it had one of them like plastic tabs that you get for like circular batteries to stop them draining power or something like that. So I ripped the thing out. I think I had to get my teeth and rip it out with my teeth because it was in there. And I clicked it and it took a picture. So I have a remote Dewberry. So it can take pictures, it will stop and start videos, which I thought was pretty cool. Had no idea what it was, I almost broke it. In the two clips you've just watched, they were videos that I had filmed quite a while back, which are obviously up on the channel. And it does make me think that, or a small part makes me feel like the redundancy was like a small fraction part my fault. Other people that I've said this to, they just, you know, they keep saying, you know, the redundancy wasn't your fault. Things have been happening. The tech industry is upside down at the moment. You know, things are quite unstable. No, redundancy wasn't your fault. It just happens. But there's something that's niggling in the back of my head, thinking that a small part is my own fault, which, you know, may sound cryptic, but I'll come on to now. I wish that I had started learning something, you know, many years ago, rather than having to try and relearn something now at the age of 32, or even just try and specialize in something that maybe have cemented a bit more of a concrete career in a way. I know that sounds really weird, but it's how I've been thinking it over in my head. In any industry, people will specialize in the field that they find interesting, or sometimes just the field that they fall into. So for example, let's take the health industry, like medicine and all that sort of stuff. You can study to become a doctor or a surgeon or, you know, a GP or whatever the case may be. But within them fields, you have like different branches of career. So you could be like a heart surgeon or a brain surgeon or someone who specializes in like ears, nose and throats and things like that. So this is what I mean is, you know, trying to pick something to specialize in and just focus on that, which makes me think, you know, I should have at least tried to figure out what I wanted to do years ago rather than maybe like a year ago. And I know that sounds like I'm probably putting a bit too much pressure on myself because, you know, not everyone figures out what they want to do with their life in terms of career and all that sort of stuff, you know, right away. So I think in that sort of sense, I feel like I'm putting a bit too pressure on myself. But there are other factors that I do kick myself and do regret in a small way about how I could have potentially avoided the redundancy and, you know, avoided, you know, not specializing in something sooner. When I was about 13, maybe 14, I got introduced to, I think it was like computer programming. We had a family friend who always worked with computers ever since he was younger, like when computers first, you know, basically came about. And he showed me how to write some code. I think it was in Visual Basic on how to write like a for loop. So, you know, the computer would basically do something X amount of times. And there's something about that I looked at and I was like, oh my God, that's amazing. Like I can write some code and tell a computer to, you know, perform a certain action. There's something about it at the time, and I know it sounds weird, but it still does now. It blows my mind. I know it sounds really stupid, but I genuinely find it really fascinating. You know, back then I was, you know, I bought a couple of books, you know, like beginners and all that sort of stuff, learning how to like program in Visual Basic. I think it got to the point where I'd, you know, written a basic web browser. You know, you could visit a website or a web page, whatever. It had basic commands that you could go back and you could go forward a page, and obviously had minimize, maximize, and obviously you could close the window, which becomes part of the Windows like SDK, I think. And there's something about it I just found really, really fascinating. You know, I've written this program that I can use and, you know, potentially redistribute as well. I don't know, something about it was just really, really surreal. I think when I was younger as well, not many houses had the internet. Obviously, the internet did exist. I'm not that old. But not many houses actually had the internet because it was all dial-up. If you don't know what dial-up, Google it and listen to the dial-up sound. So the internet was not as fast or as responsive as it is today with like broadband and fiber and all that sort of stuff. So we didn't have the internet at home for quite a while, and it felt like until we got the internet, that's where I kind of started falling off in terms of like my interest in like programming. So I discovered online gaming, and I felt like I wasted a lot of time playing games rather than learning something that I was interested in, which was, computers. Once again, computers is a massive field in itself. There's loads of jobs and careers underneath it, especially nowadays as well. I kind of regret wasting a lot of time in terms of like playing games. So in some ways, I don't really regret it, but there is a small part of me thinking that, if I hadn't have spent so many years playing games online, maybe I could have, learned something like worthwhile. But I know it sounds contradictory, and I can't really like put it in my head and how I've been thinking about it for this past year, because I'm like conflicting with myself, saying, I don't regret it because I did learn a lot, but then I do regret it because I haven't learned enough in what I'm interested in. I know it sounds contradictory and it sounds really weird, but I do feel like spending all that time, playing games and, basically good, because I was still in school, during this time, that I'd go to school, I'd come back, do any homework, which, homework wasn't that hard. It only take me like half an hour. And then straight after that, I'd be jumping on, my laptop to, basically play a game until dinner, and then obviously like shower, then bed, and then, go to school the next day. Don't get me wrong, I did play out with like friends and stuff, but by the time I was like halfway through secondary school, or high school if you're in America, most of the people that I hung up with had like moved away with their family, so I didn't really have like many friends where I lived, like during my like early teens, I'd say. But then again, I kicked myself thinking, you had all of this time, why didn't you focus on something that you had an interest in, which was computers, and still is today. And I think there was some sort of like weird eureka moment. I was playing a game, I can't remember what game it was, where I was walking through like this junkyard and, spotted the building in the background and like these derelict cars and all that. It wasn't The Last of Us, but it sounds like it. But I know it wasn't The Last of Us. And I just remember walking through these fields going, I want to get into games. Which kind of fits hand in hand, doesn't it, really? I've been playing games for so many years, even since I was younger, like playing Mario and things like that. But then, playing online games, oh my God. I kind of had like a revelation in a way, but like, get into games. That's something that you want to do. But then what do you want to do in games? Because once again, it's another umbrella in itself. So when I started researching, what sort of jobs are in games, you've got programmers, you've got animators, you've got 3D modelers, and, whatever else. The first thing that I did want to get into was 3D modeling, because I did enjoy, using like Maya or 3ds Max to, make 3D models. The environment itself is what kind of captured me into thinking, I want to get into games because I want to know how they do something. At the time, I was working full-time in retail as a manager, so I cut my hours down, started studying, went back to college, and then obviously university and all that sort of stuff. And then my mind shifted, thinking, I do want to do 3D modeling, but I also want to do programming as well, because I felt like I was trying to basically like cover my own back in terms of I want to do 3D modeling, but then if I can't get a 3D modeling job, then focus on programming, because programming isn't just games. It's like software. Programming is everywhere, basically. It's in anything, it's in like cars, it's in phones, well, especially nowadays. Software is everywhere. And I think the thing that, even to today, which is kind of where my regret comes from, is I didn't pick a speciality in something that I was interested in. I kind of kept myself very, very broad in terms of, I'd say that I was more generalized rather than focus on one specific thing and become really good at it. I knew, and still know kind of a lot of things, but I'm okay at them because I haven't focused on that one particular thing. And during my 5 years in, the job that I had before I got made redundant, I had several different roles within the job. And anytime like an opportunity came up, my mind would switch and be like, oh, I need to focus on this now because, this opportunity's come up. And then another opportunity would come up and then I'd learn or figure out something else. And, I know it sounds stupid, but it was quite overwhelming, for me. I know for other people it's not, but because I was new to the industry and still trying to figure out myself, I was jumping between any sort of potential job that came up depending on, what my interest was at the time, which is not a good way to do it, really. There was things like physics programming, gameplay programming, network, tools. There was a lot of things. And, I jumped between these things like every couple of months. I think even like a full stack development thing is something that I looked at because there was something I was developing at work and I was like, oh my God, this is full stack development, developing the front end and the back end. And, it's just, once again, I didn't focus on one thing. I kept jumping, and this is why I kick myself even to today, because I didn't have a speciality. Even prior to being made redundant, I think it was probably about a year, my job primarily focused on like data and data analytics and maybe a little bit of data science here and there as well. And that's one thing I find really fascinating, and kind of like even today, I do love looking at data. I love analyzing it. I love, being like a scientist and how to, display information, make the information useful, and even like data science as well. Whereas, not data science, data engineering, where, you kind of get involved in pipelines and like analytics pipelines and all that sort of stuff. So that's kind of like my focus at the moment. It's like learning different things about that, which I'll explain in next week's video a little bit more. But the thing that I kick myself is like, why didn't I pick something sooner and focus on that? That's the problem that I feel like I have. As I said, I feel like I'm too generalized, which in the tech industry and any industry, you can't necessarily, in my opinion, be generalized. You have to have a speciality. You have to have a focus so that I can go into this job, I can do this, maybe have, feelers or knowledge in a couple of other areas because it does help, but not having that primary focus or that primary intelligence in something. I feel like that's where it's come to bite me basically on the backside. As I said, I may be reading, too far into it, but I just do feel like if I had some sort of speciality behind me saying, I'm very good at network programming or gameplay programming, or I'm very good at like C++ or Python or SQL or whatever, because I have all of this general knowledge, I don't feel like I can jump into a specific job because I know okay things about a lot of things, but I don't know one very good thing about one thing, if that makes any sense. And the other thing is, it kind of feels like, with me being 32 and, even like graduates now are struggling to find a job, have I left it too late? I personally don't think I've left it too late, but there's always that something in the back of my mind thinking, you've left it too late, you're 32 years of age, what's the point? Because, if even graduates are finding it hard to get a job, and even people with years and years of experience, as I mentioned in my last video, even they're being laid off with experience too. So I just think that I've kind of put myself in a really, really bad position. Something may come up in the future where, maybe it's like the right place, right time kind of thing, but it just feels like at the moment, I feel like I've blocked myself. As weird as it sounds, but having that constant question, thinking, have I left it too late? I don't think I have. I personally don't think I have. And with the introduction of AI and stuff, AI can help. I don't want to rely on it too heavily. I think it's something we're going to have to get used to. It is here, so try and utilize it, because jobs, I believe, will require it in the future, and some jobs even are now. But with that, I've got a very solid plan now on what I'm going to do, what my next steps are. There's a couple of things that I'll mention, which will be in next week's video. So stick around for that. Thank you for watching this video. Appreciate it. This one was another bit of a ramble, but next week I'll cover, my final plan and what my steps are from there, really. So once again, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up. Any advice or anything on videos, please leave it in the comments, because I'm just starting out. So any constructive criticism, would be absolutely welcome, and I'll try and act on it for next and future videos as well. So thank you for watching, and I'll catch you guys next week. See ya.